So I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is not a Brown Act meeting, but we are going to operate under the same set of kind of rules as best practices. So we will go ahead and ask Kaylee to give us a roll call, please.
Absolutely. Chair Jones.
Yes.
Councilmember Jan Zabriskie.
Here.
Jeff Manasco.
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay Rona.
Here.
Lisa Wallace.
Here.
Pamela Hobday.
Here.
Stephanie Olivieri.
Here.
Travis Tribble.
Here.
Rolf Godon.
Here.
And Jessica Penman is noted absent.
And I just want to welcome everyone back. It's great to see you and
Yes.
our favorite topic at hand. We will open at this time for public comment for anything not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the public who'd like to make an announcement? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and we will move right into.
I'm sorry. Is this my one chance?
No, unless it's for things, if it's something not on the agenda, yes.
Thank you.
If
I
it's-
believe it's on the agenda.
Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna go to Carissa.
Yes.
For a presentation. Sorry, I caught you off guard there.
I'll give a quick update to everyone. We went to town council on April 7th. Just an update on the river revitalization effort and the Callis projects, along with a discussion about next steps for this group. Based on that conversation, council directed staff to reconvene this group as an ad hoc advisory committee. We previously were a Brown Act group. Really what that means is there's less rules around what we're doing. We don't have to worry about a quorum. But like Joan said, we're trying to follow best practices and be open and communicative and post the agenda and do all the same things. Council reaffirmed for us that Callis projects remain a central part of implementing the R3 playbook. They were also clear that they're not likely to allocate additional resources beyond what's already been committed to those Callis projects. Which makes prioritization and focus especially important. That's one of our agenda topics. There's a broader discussion around the challenges we've been working through with the Catalyst. Many of them are zoned residential zoning, which affects the feasibility of changing the types of projects. So we're going to be reviewing that. In that context, council was supportive of looking at tools like phased or planned development approach as a way to balance the near-term feasibility with the long-term policy alignment, which is, again, another agenda topic here. So tonight is direct response to that town council meeting where we're gonna look at land use approaches for these catalyst sites and what makes sense to help them move forward. Then project updates and where our final resources should be focused for these catalyst sites to help them be the most impactful they can be. And then input on the future of the east parcel of 10257 West River Street, which is the eastern portion of what is currently W.M. Park. And so I put this in our email to everyone, but just as a reminder, we have very focused questions we're trying to accomplish so that we can put our input towards town council and they can hear from this group. That's a recap of town council and then a quick housing element update. I know not everyone in this room follows everything the town is doing, but the housing element is an exciting piece, and Danielle's behind me and she can add if I speak out of turn on any piece, but housing element is a state required part of our general plan that plans for how Truckee accommodates housing across all income levels. It's a piece that the town has to allow zoning for all potential housing by a certain number from the state. We don't have to build the housing, we have to allow zoning to accommodate the housing. And so at that point, it affects the zoning, which is why we are looking at the two-phase approach in our agenda packet tonight, because the housing element plays a key part in what we're allowed to do with residential zoning. It's a super high level. I wasn't trying to deep dive for anyone, but at least wanted to get that concept. It's a state required process we're going through that has to do with residential zoning. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. Should I go some questions? Is there any questions on either of those items?
We all have to talk that fast?
Yes.
Because we're under.
It's gonna be really challenging.
Well done, Carissa.
Yeah, well rehearsed. If not, I will move into the discussion items. So the first item is, Stephanie will lead us in a discussion on the Catalyst projects, the two-phase land use approach.
Great, so as Carissa said, there's a few questions that the R2SC is really tasked with providing input on that One of them is the use of the plan development process. And the question, we'll get to in a minute, but really the plan development process is a way to look at the projects moving forward. As you can see on this slide, it's a way to retain our existing zoning and allow flexibility through a site-specific plan development application. So, this process has been used at other times by the town. The Pioneer Commerce Center is an example of one, and it's a way to help work through some of those issues that have come up, like the zoning changes that need to be done. If there were specific questions related to projects, they allow the town to be able to work through those on an individual basis without changing zoning townwide. And it can be used to enable uses that would otherwise not be permitted at this time. Some of the key features are that it does establish project-specific standards. So as part of the process, it would be the town staff working with the project to understand what those trade-offs might be, to be able to allow for approval of the project. But the key piece is that it has to have a project with a superior project quality. It's not just hey, you're approved. It's a process to work through. You have to require substantial public benefit, amenity, address the life safety code compliance issues. The idea behind this being the phase one, this near-term approach for the Catalyst projects, and just for the Catalyst projects, it would allow them to move forward without having to wait for the rezoning, and then provide that flexibility while still maintaining the oversight by the town. The second phase of the project, of this approach, would be the longer-term rezoning. So that would be rezoning of West River, East River, those areas that had been identified in the playbook and in the general plan, to a mixed-use district. Again, this is about aligning with the general plan land use designations, supporting all the things that we talked about through the development of the playbook, and allow consistency with the housing element update and then also the downtown Truckee plan. Timing-wise, this is a little bit of a longer process, so we need to initiate it after the housing element would be complete, which is anticipated to be next year. It's a more complex process. It requires environmental review, which is again the reason for the short-term plan development process proposal. But it would establish that permanent regulatory framework so that projects moving forward after that would not have to work through this keeping process. So the question that we've been asked, or are now asking the R2SC, is the R2SC's level of support for the concept for the town moving forward with its plan development process for the East River Street and West River Street Catalyst projects. We'll pause for questions first and then perhaps have discussion. But questions on the process, plan development.
So you say it's laid out with the existing zoning, and then specific details to the project itself, the specific development, and zoning can be changed as well at some point?
On that site-specific basis, you want to talk about it?
No, Danielle.
Yeah, that's part of the two-phase process. So for the first phase, they wouldn't necessarily have to change the zoning. That's just where we're looking at what types of uses could be allowed on the property and sort of how to look at the existing non-conforming issues that each property might have. So it just creates some flexibility for an interim process, but then wouldn't preclude the changing the zoning to the more permanent zoning.
So what process does it go through? It starts with existing development guidelines, and then it goes through a public process to change that. The zoning they wanted to change the zoning.
I mean, the zoning will eventually need to change to be consistent with the general plan. So the plan development, which is a land use permit that goes to the planning commission, is a more near-term process, but not intended to be long-term, just because long-term the zoning is going to change.
So if the zoning changes for a specific site only, does that set a precedent for other properties?
No, I don't think that's exactly what we're talking
So
about.
I think if I understand, the zoning actually wouldn't change during the
Not in the
PD
plan development.
process at that time. It wouldn't change until this longer term phase of this approach comes through with the mixed use zoning designation. So it's just a project approval through working through a series of requirements with the project proponent and the town to understand, are you getting the more substantial public benefit through the project proposal without changing the zoning?
So can I add some context as well, just because
Yeah.
we deep dove a little on the staff side?
Confusing.
So essentially, both, I'm just gonna refer, the Truckee River Partners site as well as Mark Tanner Construction site are both roughly, Truckee River Partners has some other zoning, but high density residential.
Right.
And we'd like to have them be more than just that. And so to do that, before we can do zoning for the whole corridor, the plan development process will allow project-specific goals and deviations from the existing development code that we all agree with through a community process, going to plan commission, provide a greater public benefit than just following the standard development code. Does that make sense?
Sort of.
So, legal nonconforming, we dealt with a lot through R2SE, and this is a way to show if you provide a great benefit to the community, you can deviate a bit from the black and white standards that we know can keep us from moving forward along the river.
So let me ask it a different one. Let's say, let's take East River Street. Let's say for the near term, we have decided that we want XYZ zoning changes. And as we move into longer term, we want to change those. And that will be accommodated.
That'll be a Danielle level question.
Yeah, so Pam, it's mostly the uses in this near term that we would be adding in to allow them in what currently is a pretty restrictive residential zone.
Right.
So that's what the plan development option allows for.
Okay.
And then you wouldn't necessarily have to change the zoning as part of that phase. The changing
Going
the
longer term.
Yeah, that's the longer term.
So it's a public process when they bring the project forward and the uses are changed?
If they want to change the uses, yes. So like if we're talking about just the catalyst sites, right? Because these are all residential zones, we're trying to consider additional uses that could be appropriate for those sites based on the input that R2SC has had. And that's what the plan development process allows for. Because right now, with them being residential and with us having the legal nonconforming restrictions, there isn't a lot they can do with the properties without having this process created.
Can I add one more piece of context that I think might be helpful for the group? Is the CALA sites were intended to help us move forward for not just the CALA sites, but the entire corridor.
Right.
The plan development, at least as I understand, is something that's gonna be able to be used for our CALA sites. Because they're CALA sites, that is part of their greater public benefit. The zoning that will eventually happen will help the entire corridor. But we want to help action occur before we can get through the zoning process. Because our CALA sites were intended to have some type of action happen within 5 years. And we want to allow that to happen faster than we can get our zoning done because of the state required housing element.
Right, but they're gonna have to conform with that zoning at some point.
Down the road.
Down the road.
Yep.
Down the road.
Yep.
So what if they build something that doesn't comply in the meantime, in the short term? That's where I'm getting.
Sorry, I didn't realize that was on. I think the idea is that they want to try something now, and it would be in alignment with what the vision ultimately is,
Okay.
to see if it works.
That makes
You're
sense.
right, that if it was, I wanna build a spa today, and I know that's never gonna be allowed, that
Right.
wouldn't work. But going through a plan development would help inform that seems to be in line with the public, there's gonna be a public process, we're gonna hear that feedback, and it seems to be in alignment with that, and ultimately the zoning would include that.
And another clarifying question, we're only talking about doing this for the catalyst sites. If somebody else came along
Right.
and wanted to do development at this point, we wouldn't be
Right.
considering it.
Exactly. So another question, following up on what you said. The near-term plan development process, one of the bullets is to provide a mechanism for transitioning non-conforming uses over time. What is a mechanism for that? Give us an example of what would be a mechanism for transitioning non-conforming uses over time.
I think Danielle might be able to go deeper than I could as a planner, because I'm
Okay.
not a planner. But as I understand currently, in these non-residential zoning, we are not allowing any kind of intensification, of the existing uses because they don't comply. And so by providing a public benefit, depending what the planned use becomes, it's allowing some flexibility in that, as long as we agree as a community and some guidance from R2SC, if you're following the playbook, that it's getting closer to the R3 playbook goals.
So let's say one of the Catalyst sites wants to do I think somebody had mentioned before, a glass blowing shop.
Right.
Not currently allowed, that's something they'd like to do. They come in
It's
under the
non-conforming.
plan development, the site itself has legal non-conforming.
Mm-hmm.
One piece of the public benefit is this is a Catalyst site. Another piece of the public benefit is you agree to bring these health and safety things as a condition of approval up to standards, or something like that. And it's a trigger, like you only get to do the glass blowing if you do some of these non-conforming things. It may not be all of them, it may be a phase something, I think that's all to work through, but I think that's the concept.
So the language mechanism would be that. Okay.
And you know, we'd have to think through triggers of timing, right? Because you
Mhm.
probably need to do some of those before you can actually start with rehab or something like that. But it would be in exchange for doing some of these things, through the Catalyst PD, you're agreeing to address some of, we do health and safety first, obviously.
But they still conform, even the uses that would be non-conforming under our guidelines aren't going to set back the vision. Is that correct?
So like if a property has 4 different businesses in them and they're all non-conforming right now,
Mhm.
maybe it's 2 of the 4 have to transition to something via the plan development. It can work in any different way. I think what we've learned and we've talked about here is that in order to have all of the non-conforming stuff transition out at the same time is not practical for the property owners, is what we heard.
Right.
So this was a kind of step process towards addressing that in exchange for trying to improve the properties.
So, you're talking about the Catalyst project, you would only approve one, and then the other ones that are there non-conforming, they would have to leave as a condition for you to approve the one? That would
Not-
impact 3 other
Yeah, not
non-conforming
necessarily.
businesses?
No, not necessarily.
The concept, as I understand it, is very loose and able to be malleable to make sure that the community is getting the benefit it needs. And I think as a community, we're not trying to put people out of business, but we're also trying to move closer towards the goals that we've all agreed on that are in the R3 playbook. So I think it's that balance that will have to be done on the staff side before it goes to planning commission, working with the property owner of what makes sense to move closer to the community goals while allowing a little more flexibility. So it's not something that we can do a check mark, like get 3 gone, you get this. There's no like check mark now. It's something that's gonna have to be collaborated on.
Well, the reason why I bring it up is because the town always wants their pound of flesh.
Oh,
right?
you remembered that?
I do, I remember everything. So, like, if they're a Catalyst project and they want something, you guys put the chokehold on them to get rid of the other ones?
It could
Is
be, Travis, maybe there's a property that has, electrical and plumbing that's not up to code and is a health and safety issue, and maybe the Catalyst piece of that is we agree to bring those up to standards in the first year. And it's, in that case, there's no movement of property owners, we're addressing those really health and safety things. Then the next phase might be, we need a new roof and we wanna build onto this building, and paint the outside of the whole building to at least make it look better. Like it might be, it's hard to say exactly, like maybe the property owner wants to change a use. It might be something simple. It would be whatever through that public process is worked out.
Lisa?
Yeah, I have two questions. Why is the question of this strategy coming to the R2SC? That's one question, and then the second question is, for the staff who've been working with the Catalyst property owners, I know we're gonna have public comment, and we'll hear from them, but, with your work today, what's your understanding so far of their responses to the strategy? But I am confused about why the strategy is coming to the steering committee.
Can I add to your question?
Sure,
Because
of course,
I'm on the
please.
same lines. I'm used to the situation where a developer who wants to do a planned development because they don't want to have to comply with existing requirements, they'll come in with what's superior about the project and what the public benefit will be. And then staff reviews it, makes a recommendation, planning commission, and then maybe it goes to council. That's a situation where someone is advocating for the public benefit and something else in terms of quality, two really squishy things. And the commission has all of this discretion to decide whether they meet the criteria of the proposed project. Here, I feel like we're being asked to consider and possibly recommend a planned development strategy when we don't know what the public benefit or quality is of the project. And then would we recommend something like that to the commission and council?
I'm
not
sure
knowing
Jen has
what
some
we're-
thoughts. I can share just from my perspective. This, to me, was a very creative solution proposed originally. It came out of one of our Catalyst meetings where we were running up against, we can't do any of these new ideas. We just can't until we realize the timeline of the housing element affecting our rezoning. So what can we do in the interim was nothing, was the answer, if we don't come up with something. So Danielle had this idea of looking through the development code and realizing we have something baked into our development code that could allow some flexibility. And it also, at least from my perspective, felt like something that if we started to move forward with the Catalyst projects and this concept, without coming to this group, it felt like we were almost sidestepping this group and not allowing this group to have part of this. We do not have a complete plan
Okay.
development for anybody to approve or concept or narrow down or come together right now. But it's just, does this concept make sense? Are we comfortable with this idea? Is this what we want for our Catalyst sites?
Okay, so it might be, the question for R2SC might be, are we opposed to a planned development permit? I mean, one of our recommendations is, we're not opposed to it. That could be what comes
Correct.
out of this meeting. Okay, related to this is, I don't know what the West River project, Jan Holland's project, how it fails to comply with the riverfront mixed use zoning that's recommended in the general plan.
A good portion of it is currently high density residential.
But that's because the development code hasn't yet been amended to comply with the general plan?
Which can't happen until after the house, so it's this chicken and egg situation,
We're not
so we.
doing the development code amendment until after, that's what you were just saying,
Mhm.
okay.
This is
And
a
then
long
on the Mark
timeline.
Tanner property, is density the only issue, or does his project also, at this point, conceptually include, commercial uses?
It could potentially include commercial uses outside of the high
Are
density
those
residential.
two big things for the two different properties? Okay.
So maybe, Lisa, just to be more direct about your question, when we chose Catalyst sites here, there was a recommendation, it went to council, council said, yes, let's see what could happen. They were kind of broken out into the three buckets. We had Old Trestle, which was kind of immediate, can happen in a year. We had the West River Associates, kind of adaptive reuse, midterm, and then Mark Tanner's property is like the 5-year, longer term, more complicated, much more open to like what works here. And in the course, I think, of the Catalyst site meetings, it's become more apparent that the 5-year vision may be great, but like, could we try something in the interim? And we don't have a pathway for that. It wasn't something this group talked about. You could hold firm, nope, that's the 5-year one, let's just wait for zoning, but it doesn't really work for the property owner, at least so far. So we were trying to provide a solution for that. And then for the West River property, still working through, which you all noodled on quite a bit, how do we address this legal non-conforming in a more incremental way? And so this was kind of the solution at doing that, but it felt appropriate to bring back to this group. We checked with council, because if the answer was no, we're not gonna spend any time doing this, like, then it would be disingenuous to come here. But council was open to hearing the feedback from this group if you thought that was a reasonable strategy. Clearer.
And any initial indications on, for the Catalyst property owners, how this strategy is perceived by them?
I'll see they're in the room and they can speak when it's public
Yeah.
comment, but everyone seems open to this concept.
Right.
No one's committed to anything, we're not
Yeah.
there, but as a concept of like, we have the flexibility to potentially move forward in the interim, interest.
Just speculating with them being on the river, it seems like there's a natural way they could have a public benefit.
The other concept that we talked through is being a Catalyst site by complying, getting closer to the R3 playbook, showing the community that it can, that alone could be a public benefit. As you've said, that is up to the discretion of our planning commission.
If there aren't any more questions, it might be a good time to open it up for public comments. But are there other questions from the board? It'll come back for discussion, but questions from?
Yeah, I think, agree. We will open for public comments. And you're free to stay where you are, but I would appreciate if you said your name and there are people, I think, are we live streaming?
Yes.
Yes, so that we are live streaming, so speak up.
Go ahead, Mark. Hey, you want me to go first?
You go first.
Do I need to stand somewhere so we can?
No, but you're welcome to, if you're more
You can stand
comfortable.
up or sit.
Well, I have to stand up, I didn't know if I needed to go to.
No,
but-
I don't think.
Typically,
you-
everyone can hear me, I'm pretty loud.
Yeah, you're,
Okay.
yeah,
There's
you
microphones in the ceiling.
we can hear you, and there are microphones in the ceiling.
Yes,
No
good,
big deal.
okay. My name is Mark Tanner. I'm one of the selected Catalyst sites for Mark Tanner Family Trust, 10603 East River Street. I just want to say, the town has been very collaborative to date and very, very helpful in getting us here. I'm a little bit different, and I probably opened Pandora's box with some of this, because I am not a developer by trade, we're a contractor, we do development, but we looked at our site as a blank canvas, and that's what I came to the town with. It's like, I don't know what this site can be. All I know is that what we are on the river, a general construction site and yard, is probably not appropriate, okay? We are more than happy to move at some point in time when it's determined what is the appropriate use for that site. And our site could also then have a domino effect with adjacent neighbor sites, potentially. So that being said, we've gotten to a point now where I just saw some numbers. We're about halfway there in terms of the money, which makes me a little bit more worried again as well, because there's so much to do. And being a blank canvas and not traveling the world, or even a large part of the states, I don't know what's the best thing to put on the river. And we only have so many river sites to do that in. So that's where I was looking for collaboration from not only the town, but the community to come up with best ideas and to see what sticks and that can be feasible, okay? And so part of this was, I'm like, this is gonna take a while to get there. Plus, as was mentioned, the whole chicken before the egg with the housing element. I'm like, that's all great, but maybe there's an opportunity to try a couple things like right now. I didn't get to see it. I missed the only serious one I think I missed in last year, like 2 weeks ago. And it was about, I think it was over at Tahoe City, changing a site. My wife's like, you gotta read this. So it's on the list for her to pull up tonight and for me to read. I didn't get to do it before the meeting. But that's where Kings Beach has had, where you could do food trucks or entertainment. Again, I'm looking at ways to activate a site adjacent to the river and better the river as well. And so that's where we're still at the very beginning, but it's about bringing the community down to the river and being able to recreate in some type of capacity. And so that's where some of this discussion came about, at least at our Catalyst site meeting, may have come up at some of the other ones. And it's like, well, in order for me to even have Friday and Saturday food trucks and cornhole and bocce or whatever, open to the citizens, we need to change the zoning in order to do that. I can't even just have a pop-up right now. And with that, we'd be able to get the community's feedback on if this is something they might like to see in the future. Again, I'm going to bet a little bit different way. I'm a blank canvas. We can do anything. I'm not coming with a plan. We're trying to be a partnership in terms of what we develop. We kind of got one shot at that that's going to last for hundreds of years. And so, want to get it right. And so that being said, I appreciate everyone's town's help. I was a little bit, we had a call with Hillary, and I was a little bit forthright with Hillary, and I want to make sure I let her know I'm thanking her and everything the town has done. It's just, I'm a little bit lost in the process because I don't know what we want yet. I'm looking for that feedback, and when that feedback comes, I need to know that we can financially make it happen too, because I can't do a project where all of the burden is put on us as the private sector. So that being said, I think we've had good meetings to date. We've got a long way to go, but I think we're getting the very baby steps to kind of help us along. And Pam's been very helpful, and Stephanie's been very helpful with Design Workshop Group, and everyone. So we've had a lot of people in the room. It's just like, okay, we got to focus because there's big things in the room. Union Pacific, which none of us have control over. Receiver sites, which none of us have control over. And that's the thing I've learned. The receiver sites are way out if anything's viable. And if that's working with the airport or TSD or other agencies that aren't the town, we aren't controlling them. And if I'm going to move, I need some place to move to. And the only way to move to those is when those become available. And right now, none of them are willing to really say they're available. And so, again, chicken before the egg type thing. And so that's where incremental.
Great, thank you. And we will do individual Catalyst site updates. So we're really looking for feedback on this process as well.
That's what I thought. So I'll hold most of my comments about our specific site. I think the plan development is a viable option for any of these Catalyst sites. As Jan Zabriskie pointed out, really any property owner, any developer could come to the town and say, hey, I want to do a plan development. So in a way, this is just keeping you updated, but also giving, being clear and transparent about some of the options. One of the things that I want to just point out to this committee is to not necessarily step off the gas on the development code updates, right? Because from a property owner standpoint, I would feel a lot more comfortable if it didn't take, let's say, 5 years to update the zoning, or 5 years to address, in our property, we're really stymied by the River Protection Overlay District for the setbacks. So I won't get too specific in our plan, but I'm saying it's kind of a yes and, right? The plan development is, a good option. There's some concerns as a property owner. The pound of flesh thing comes to mind, all that. But I do think that it's, as a Catalyst project, there's plenty of public benefit that we can demonstrate in a planned development, and we're supportive of that path as long as we don't forget about updating the development code, which impacts all of our neighbors. And we're actually more concerned, or as concerned about our neighbors being frozen in time and not being able to upgrade their properties because it holds us back. It's a rising tide together. So.
Any other public comment? Thank you. Bring it back in for discussion.
Can I?
Yes.
Kind of a
please.
clarifying question maybe for Danielle, because Jan, you just brought up the development code process, and so we heard, it can't start till after the housing element. Just a rough idea of how long, and again, it could probably all depend on how big or not we're going, but what would you foresee that process to update the zoning in the corridor take?
Yeah, I mean, probably 6 to 9 months because we would have to create new development standards, and that's probably the bulk of the work. I mean, even though we already have the general plan land use designation as a guide, there's so much detail in all of those standards that we'd have to go back through all of them and either create new ones or, you know, kind of pull off of other zoning districts where we think they're appropriate. So it's best guess.
Okay, but it wouldn't be 5 more years, you know, I think, and I don't know if you were specifically highlighting that, but it, you know.
6 to 9 months after the housing element is
Right.
completed, but.
Yes.
But that seems like a best guess.
It is a best guess, and it also depends on what else we're working on at the time. I mean, even though that will be a priority, it's just a heavy lift for the planners to do that work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Comments, discussion?
I'd like to know that one of my questions was, how did the property owners feel about it? And it seems like they're on board.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
We're happy to hear, we're happy to understand how the property owners feel about it, was the comment.
About the plan development process.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a viable option, and, yeah, that makes sense. I do wanna add to Mark Tanner's comment that we're super happy with the Catalyst project. It's unstuck a bunch of stuff, and it's changed the entire nature of the conversation, so that's
Great.
been
That's nice to
incredibly
hear.
helpful.
Thank you.
I would like to know in my brain what his property is zoned for.
High-density residential,
High density residential.
24
How many?
units per
24?
acre.
How many acres do you have? So,
12 units, and then some calculations were done that allowed some additional density through some ADU possibilities, is that correct?
That's correct.
additional density of how many?
5, I think was total.
It was
Off the top of my head, I think it was about 17.
It's possible 17 units. Okay, now I know what yours is zoned for. How about yours?
Well, it's the same zoning, 24, and there's 3 acres of that, so about 70, 72 units, something like that.
Okay.
Other questions,
Yeah.
discussion?
Yeah, I have one, I think if, it's the recommendation of the staff to use this strategy, I'm definitely amenable to that, especially because the Catalyst project, major partners and landowners, are positive about it. I'm wondering if, as part of the discussion of moving this strategy ahead, we could get some guidance from you on some broad agreements, so you don't have to come back to us for strategy again. Like, it's a little painful, that we're taking time and money to review. To me, it's a little, might not be to anybody else, but to me, it's a little painful that, the strategy's coming before us, and, like, the idea is that we just wanna free this up to move ahead, and if this is basically the only strategy that's gonna get us to move ahead, it would have been nice if we could have somehow set some sideboards or given some guidelines previously, so we didn't have to come here this evening. So maybe there's a way to do that, for going forward. But I think I'm positive about it, since it seems to be the only strategy and people are in agreement.
Yeah, I like that it's opened the door for discussion of options. And it hasn't pigeonholed it into a specific, use. That we think broadly and out of the box on these. You know, my concern is actually that Catalyst moves forward and somebody else is excited about it and wants to do something, and they get stuck because they don't have that same flexibility. But if this is in our guidelines already as a planned development process, maybe there's opportunity for somebody who doesn't get the assistance of town but still wants to do something. So I would almost wanna broaden it a little bit, that if it moves the playbook forward, pretty good with that. You know,
Yeah.
it unstuck the process is a big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too, but I appreciate that the town has come to the committee. I think public input is covered your ass in a way, and it's important. But also, we're here tonight to look at a couple of other things, and I'm very glad that the town saw fit to bring forward to us and see if we believe it fits in the realm of the playbook, so.
I think it's really important knowing the work that we all did for over 2 years and the importance of that work, especially for the neighborhood and the people who live on East and West River Street, the importance of our Catalyst project property owners really respect that they want community input. And we've heard that at all 5 of our meetings. And this is really an important way to begin to do that.
I think one of the big things that we're gonna be facing as a committee's work, as we move forward, is what changes in zoning will be coming along and the allowed uses that fall under those. So I think there's gonna be further need for debate, I think following zoning, so that we make sure it follows our vision. That's a big thing for me. And the allowed uses under the zoning.
I'll add, I'm excited about this idea and being able to get things unstuck. I think that's great, and it's great to hear that, we've been able to make some movement. And I think what I heard from this committee throughout the process is flexibility. Travis, I know you brought up property owners and ensuring they're involved, so really excited that this kind of gives the property owners and the town and the community to work together to have some flexibility to exactly push forward the R3 playbook, and then help us as we go through the zoning process. Maybe again, it even helps us understand a little bit more of this is something we need to think about after going through this plan development process. So I see this as a great step and helping accomplish a lot of the goals that I think this committee set out to do.
Any other comments? Do you have the information you guys are looking for?
I feel like we do. I feel like if I had to say, I appreciate the repositioning of the question. We positioned it as do you support it? It was an expression of positivity. I heard nothing about opposing it, I think, to your point, Don, unless I miss.
I think it provides flexibility, furthers the playbook. It energizes the Catalyst projects. I don't see a downside. This is not a one-way door. There's still lots of stops if some development, this is not a carte blanche, but it provides a more open sandbox to do all the things we've been talking about for a couple of years, so enthusiastic.
Great.
Well, what would attract me to the plan development approach comes to my concerns about the Catalyst project approach we're using, because I'm very concerned about putting redevelopment ahead of river restoration, about the cumulative impacts of development where we put off the environmental restoration, where we kick that down the road. And I see a planned development as a way not to get a pound of flesh anymore. I'm thinking more of the river restoration that's now in the playbook, and how do we get that financed, and how do we actually get the property that allows for physical and visual access to the river. And so I'm not, at this point, understanding why being a Catalyst project would in itself be a public benefit. It's gonna take me a while to understand how that might be true, but I do understand the idea of getting environmental benefit out of each Catalyst project if the planned development then becomes the vehicle for achieving that.
John, I would just offer up that doing nothing and having no development is a detriment to the public and to the river. So that's how a Catalyst project is beneficial to the public.
Depends on the development. I can't take that as a given. Depends what the development is. and what the public benefits are that
Well,
it provides.
Yeah, I have some faith that we will only do improvement. So I don't think we're gonna go backwards. I don't think we would allow it to go backwards. So that's just my faith in the
I
process.
could be convinced, but I'm not now.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, maybe I'm wrong, but whether it's a planned development or it's just a project that comes forward to us, the river is a priority, and they're going to have to meet the guidelines of the river quality and restoration regardless. And of course, it's the priority, it's the main reason for all of this. The thrust of it is to restore our beautiful river and make it a priority. And as we go down further in the agenda, I think we have some things to talk about regarding that. So I agree with you. I think the public, as the public, we're going to have to ride herd a bit on this to make sure that public benefits are appropriate and sufficient to allow.
Great,
All right.
okay, we have direction. We're gonna move on to item 5.2, and this is our Catalyst project updates and prioritization of remaining effort. There's a recommended action to receive the progress updates, provide direction regarding what should the focus of the town allocated resources for the Catalyst projects be. And the recommended action here is to receive these updates and provide direction on where the town resources should focus for the Catalyst projects. I'm gonna turn it over to you, Susan.
All right, so I will give some high-level summary of some of the work that's been done on the Catalyst project. We have some of our liaisons here. If you'd like to give some color to it as we move along, please feel free. Because these are Catalyst projects that are in progress, and there's been, a bit of work on some of the iterations of what development might look like and the types of uses. We're not gonna spend too much time on those specifics, but wanted to give you an overview of some of the work that's been done. And again, property owners are here. They can also add some commentary as well. They're looking for liaisons to add if you'd like. We'll start with 10603 East River Street. This is the Tanner property. As you can see, it's the property that's highlighted in orange, and you have a sort of a aerial oblique view of a portion of the property in the upper right corner of the slide. Current uses, it's a construction office, 250 feet of Truckee River frontage. As part of identifying some of the opportunities for this site, and its selection as a catalyst site, it had been identified because of its potential for thinking through this, relocation piece, adaptive reuse, that it has, as Mark said, this opportunity to beautify the river, to have people access the river for restoration. It was also one of the eastern corridor sites that came through as part of the Catalyst project applications, and really open to the long-term visioning, as Mark said, thinking about the highest and best use, again, the receiver site analysis and emphasis on what's best for the community. Through the time that we've spent on this project, we've been looking at a variety of uses. We've tested what residential might look like. We've tested what some other uses might look like on the site, ranging from residential to recreation to lodging, looking at receiver site opportunities, and then also this idea here, as Mark said, an interim use that might actually provide some adaptive reuse, keep a use within the existing building, and then use the other site for testing out what might be food trucks, an opportunity for some food and beverage and access to the river. Currently, BAE is working through a high-level market analysis to understand what viability there are for certain uses on this site. And anything you'd like to add there, Pam, for East River?
I think I'd just like to say that all of us, Hillary, Carissa, we have not seen this drawing before tonight. But we have discussed everything but maybe one item on that drawing. So it was good to see it. And I think that during our 5 meetings, I want to echo what Mark said. I really have appreciated staff and all of you bringing forth many different ideas to the table. And there are many to look at. But the issue has to be what might be able to be short-term while Mark is figuring out, I mean, we have to know the money. What would be expected for Mark to have to spend for any of these? And then the receiver sites. And there don't seem to be any receiver sites. So we're still marching forward, but those are some of the obstacles.
What did you end up thinking would be a good use? And I'm asking that in the context of there was some idea about having a parklet midway down East River Street. I don't know if the Catalyst Group discussed where that might go in relation to Mark's property, because he sits up on a high, it's a steep drop off. There's no public access certainly to the water.
I think Mark should answer those questions.
Keep going.
And then I didn't know, in all this Catalyst discussion, what did you end up thinking was the best use of that property?
We're not
Because Mark's
there.
saying, I just want to know.
We're not there yet,
So there are
Jan.
3 ideas on the table.
Yeah, there's ideas on the table, and BAE
Yeah.
is working through that on the financial side, as Pam
Yeah.
said, to look at the market realities of some of the uses to test and see if they are truly viable, to be able to
What uses,
reinvest in.
So 3 uses that we've come up with is residential, for residential housing,
which it's zoned for?
which it's zoned for, and it could be condos, apartments, dense residential. Honestly, probably the easiest, probably make me the most money, but it's not a community benefit if only certain individuals have access to viewing the river. So at least that's my opinion. Second use was a possible like resort type amenity basically, where there'd be lodging and maybe a food and beverage component of that that would be accessible to community citizens as well. So it wouldn't be just closed door resort. And so that was a design that's been come up with and thrown out there. The third would be, for lack of better words, kind of outdoor, indoor recreational entertainment. And then that's had a whole lot of different ideas of where that could go. And so that is still TBD.
I think.
Those are the 3, right?
Yeah, you got it, you got it.
Those are the 3, and this is another chicken and the egg scenario in that Mark really wants community input and public feedback, which we want to facilitate getting that, but we don't want to put on the table ideas that aren't going to pencil and aren't realistic. So we're trying to get that analysis first, then go out to the community and see what they're interested of things that are actually viable to help the property owner inform that decision.
I don't think it's easy, Jan, for property owners anywhere on the river to be able to say, we want this, this, and this, when they're more interested in community benefit over making money, period. It's a very different project, the one we're talking about, because of that. It would be really easy for Mark just to build residential. It would be really easy.
We need housing.
Yeah, but this
This housing wouldn't be affordable housing.
This would not be
Doesn't matter, we
affordable
need it, it
housing.
may get somebody somewhere else to move to.
Which is fine, and if that's what the community wants. Well,
But
and
in
you know, one
terms-
thing to note, which this exhibit that was provided tonight was actually helpful, even though I hadn't seen it, so I'm great that staff or other members of our committee did this. It does show that there is river access to the westerly side, which there's kind of some steps down there and flattened out and cleaned out a little bit now too. And I've had some of my staff kind of clean it out a little bit more recently, and so this is great to show what possibilities.
Yeah, this is no plan set in stone, just ideas.
Yeah, well, one idea, I wouldn't throw away the idea that you do residential, but you have an exaction, you have money go into a mitigation bank that allows acquisition of land on another part of the river that is more accessible to the public. I wouldn't just dismiss out of hand the most profitable use.
I think what our committee is focused on is working collaboratively with the property owner,
Yeah.
and that's the most important thing, especially with his interest in community benefit first. And nothing's off the table.
Yeah, okay. Because we could have the Mark Tanner mitigation ban. And then do a plaque.
That wouldn't be Mark. And he's here, he would not like that.
Let's keep moving for
Yeah.
time's sake to the West River parcel catalyst site. This is 10855 West River Street. Again, some of the ideas focusing here, the parcel in orange, yellow outline, that was the parcel that was identified as the catalyst site from the R2SC, the Community Economic Vitality team at the time. Some of the opportunities that had been identified were around beautification, adaptive reuse, looking at new commercial space, potential for housing as part of that with mixed use, improvements for ped and bicycle. Catalyst support anticipated to include help with potential lot line adjustments. There would have to be some rezoning pieces with that along with design support. As has been discussed today, there was a question about what the current zoning is. In brown, you can see the parcel is currently downtown high-density residential. That's 12 to 24 units per acre. The surrounding parcel, downtown mixed use, and then to the east, downtown manufacturing. This was just a couple of images of the current buildings on that parcel. And then below is the image that had been provided, the conceptually adaptive reuse, what that might look like. As we've begun conversations and look for liaisons and the property owner to put some color on this, but as we've had conversations, there's a discussion of the rehabilitation of the two buildings might be cost prohibitive, and then also a desire to start with river restoration as a need to understand the context of the full site. So the rest of the couple of slides, just for context, some of the things that we worked on, we're looking at, where the base flood elevation or that 100-year floodplain, that's the blue dash line that you can see through the middle of that red hatch piece. Currently in this location, the zoning code calls for a 75-foot setback from that 100-year floodplain. So that hatched area is essentially the undevelopable land or that area within that 75-foot setback and some of the constraints that puts on the property. Also looking at some of the opportunities on the flip side for where there's disturbance. You can see in sort of that orangey color, the image on the left shows where there's either existing pavement or existing compacted dirt disturbance on that parcel. And on the right, you can see where there's current habitat areas, primarily on the south side of the river. On the north side of the river, that riverbank is a bit of a mix between some willows trying to poke through riprap and some large chunks of concrete or paving that are along the river's edge there. So there's been discussion around floodplain restoration opportunities through that zone, and then also some of the community improvement opportunities on the image to the right, showing where there's viewpoint areas where people are currently actually accessing the river in some of this location and trying to think about some managed access strategies through there, along with some restoration piece, and then also the streetscape improvements. As we worked through this piece, I lost my image, so.
It's on that one, I'm not sure.
Oh.
I'll go to that too.
That's okay, we can take down that flip chart. As we work through the piece, I think one thing to consider is, we're looking at development opportunities with either keeping the setback as is, and then the property owner, Truckee River Partners, was really interested in looking at essentially restoring the floodplain through there. So taking advantage of a reduced setback, but only a reduced setback if that area was going to actually be restored. That's good.
Just crash and fail moment, it's fine.
Don't mess with Jen.
And I think that there were two options that really came up. One that showed that, restoring the river, is essentially trying to think about the setback was really about also trying to provide restoration benefit and habitat quality benefit as part of that piece. So the question here, because as has been discussed, we are a ways through some of the allocated time, especially for staff time. to support some of the catalyst projects. So the question that really is about, we came back for discussion, is what should the focus of the town staff's remaining time be for the catalyst projects for these two sites? And I think probably most in particular is the West River site, where there's an option, should we be looking at restoration or should it be the adaptive reuse, which was the original thought that that catalyst site would be. Any color you'd like to add, Steph?
No, my opinion is that,
Can we go, before we go into opinions, can we get color and questions?
yeah.
And
great.
open it up to, the-
I love it, I can keep it pretty brief.
Okay.
But I think it was a good update. I think what's become clear to us as we've gotten into the Catalyst project is that it's very important for us to address issues that, we've always considered this one project. It's two properties with very complicated mixed zoning, basically, or mixed, the zoning districts mismatch the property lines, so that stuff needs to get sorted out. But as we've gotten into this, the more we've recognized, to Jan Zabriski's comment, that we're local property owners. We're quite unique in that we actually, our priority is to do something great for the river. Yes, it needs to pencil out. Yes, we can't just throw millions of dollars at it, but we want to do this, even if down the line, we aren't the ones eventually developing parts of the property. We're uniquely positioned. I have a couple of our partners here, Juliet, Sally. We're really aligned with the community that we'd love to see some river restoration. And we're almost out of money for design workshop. They've done some great work and got us to a point where we're able to communicate the ideas better, get an idea of what needs to happen. But we're ready to spend, you know, a fair amount of money on our end to continue working with design workshop with the blessing of the R2SC to refocus whatever remaining design workshop time there is, but particularly staff workshop time to help us get to a shovel-ready restoration project, and the idea being clean up the river and work back from there towards the street. And quite frankly, as you get towards the street, it gets a lot more complicated. I mean, that gets very expensive. There's zoning that we're still trying to sort out that'll be, you know, a couple of years down the line, and streetscape improvements. I mean, we know how long it took Brickletown, West River Street to get the public processes moving. We feel like actually in a lot less than 5 years, but more like a year or two, we could be breaking ground on a river restoration project, and we hope that you'll support that direction.
questions from our group. And we didn't really take questions on the, I mean, we did some questions on the camps, but so
We
I
can
think.
there too.
So if somebody felt like they wanted to say something on the other Catalyst site, that's fine as well. But, I'm sure there's a lot of discussion on this one as well.
I have a question. On the river restoration, starting there with that, and I think I noticed on here, cottonwoods or something, you know, would it be looking at access to the river as well and how to do some of the restoration work with access, or would mainly just be doing?
I think it's both.
Okay.
I mean, we currently, even though it's private property, there's a fair amount of public access that, you know, and as we're doing restoration, I think we're gonna need to discourage the public access, but our goal is to create zones of public access and zones of restoration that is gonna be encouraged to be more natural, and recognizing that places where access is likely to take place either naturally or just by increasing the use on the property, it needs to be designed in such a way that it doesn't create erosion and trampling of native species and things like
I have a question. What's your overall scope of work over there? What is your vision of everything that you and your partners have in mind? Cause I don't think anybody knows really.
Well, I think it's probably beyond the scope of this conversation, but what we've spent $500,000 trying to get a locals housing project going there, and we still wanna do a housing project that is largely local. We would love to, do a commercial component of it so that the property is more accessible to the local community. So a mixed use project has always been in the making. The high density residential, the way it's been interpreted, has even prevented us from doing a largely housing related project because it wasn't dense enough. So it's the zoning as it's interpreted now by current state law is prohibitive even if we were to focus mostly on housing.
Other questions?
Yeah, I guess I would like to have someone re-articulate the pros and cons of doing the two parcel versus single parcel approach.
I think
And
that's-
generally understand two
Yeah,
parcel
before-
costs more.
Well, I have questions because
Okay.
I think, and Jeff, you can
I
correct
was
me
gonna
or whatever.
ask, yeah, so my question is this, so I support Jan of wanting to do the river restoration and shovel ready first. My understanding is that the Catalyst project approved by town council was for the front lot in front, and so
That's my
if
question.
That's my question.
Jan, Holland and partners want to do restoration, that's awesome. That's outside the scope, and I think it would have to go back to town council if Jan and his partners are asking for staff and consultant time to
Can I answer?
reshuffle. That's
I
my
didn't-
clarification, so
Yes.
please.
Yes, I apologize, I didn't make this clear enough in my my very rapid
Yeah.
town council recap. We asked town council about projects of how far we can expand, and in a nutshell, they said, ask R2SE.
Well,
And-
I think maybe,
Wait,
let me
yeah.
expand on that.
Maybe not quite.
No, but, so we are in the process of doing our budget cycle.
Yes.
Which coincides a little bit with work plan, right? It's not,
Sure.
we're not redoing the work plan right now. And the next thing on the list in terms of economic vitality and Chris's work is the economic vitality action plan.
Mm,
And so we did ask council if there were guardrails around
Great.
expanding catalyst sites or not. And what council said was they are comfortable if R2SC would like to expand, particularly with the West River Partners project, expand the catalyst site, but within the existing and remaining budget. So R2SC could say, we picked the two buildings, the one property, because we were focused on adaptive reuse, and we want you to continue to use the allocated budget to move that forward with the property owners. Or you could say, we are okay with expanding it. You could be as specific as on river restoration, something else, but council has said we're not gonna allocate more money and staff time because we need to move forward the other. So that's the parameters in which
Right.
you have to work.
Which comes
I have
back,
a question. When we interviewed all the people who wanted to be catalyst sites, I think that they put in two projects, one for the front site and one for the back site, or was it one project together? Like, wasn't it specifically chosen to do the front site versus the back
Yes.
site?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, I just
But
wanted
submitted
to
as
clarify.
One
project.
It was
But it
submitted
was
as one
submitted as
project,
One project.
But it was felt that
scoped
the
down.
committee, the subcommittee that made that selection,
That's
made,
what the
made it specific.
subcommittee made a recommendation to this body
Okay.
based on.
Let us talk for a little bit.
Jake was on the
Jake is on
panel.
it.
Oh,
That's why.
Yeah, Jake was
yeah,
involved,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
As a
sorry.
public comment, I'm Jake Hudson, and I was on the Catalyst Review Committee,
Mhm.
Oh, great.
Action Team, whatever it was called.
Yeah,
And part of our thinking, and I thought it was two separate projects, it was phase one. And the idea was that would promote getting the whole project done.
Yeah.
It would be a catalyst for the remainder of the site. If it's stifling the developer from moving forward, that's not doing what we wanna do with the Catalyst project. We wanna promote something on the river. And then real quick, if I can just talk about the floodplain issue, that there's a lot of fill placed right up to the riverbank. And the current restriction of 75 feet back from the high water line, the 100-year flood, I believe it is, would mean if you did restoration, you're pushing that limit even farther back. And so if that 75 feet from the high water line is is stifling restoration of the floodplain, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot with not, the developers not incentivized to restore the river if it cuts into their developable land. So that is the other part of the floodplain thing. Thank
Question
you.
then for Danielle. So could a planned development permit, could one of the modifications of the code, if you will, be a change in the setback?
The 75 feet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, could.
well, the 75, we have to think about that, yeah. I don't think that we contemplated that being one of the requests.
So
Can
my
you turn on your microphone?
I said we would have to think about that because I don't think we contemplated that being one of the requests of the plan development because it's an overlay map.
Yeah.
So it's a different section of the zoning.
And Daniel, if I could ask the question, there's a FEMA line and then there's a town line.
Right.
We, town, does ultimately have the authority to change the town line, not the FEMA line,
Yeah,
correct?
correct. I mean, you can change FEMA lines if there's different information, but that's not what we're talking about. We're
Right.
talking about the town line.
The town line.
So given that our priority here has been river health, I really, I mean, most of us aren't experts, we have Lisa, but we had a committee, the River Health Committee, that looked at this. I'm concerned that the river health needs to be the priority, not necessarily guessing at what it might be. We need experts to tell us what would we do here? What should we do for the river health?
I have no problem with river health being and that, it just wasn't what we discussed as a catalyst. And turning full circle to a new project that's, you know, like, I would love if it was river restoration, but I don't think I could be in favor of lot by lot or parcel by parcel deciding this 75-foot marker. That to me seems that is a corridor wide thing that should be discussed and resolved. So I don't know how it works to do it on a catalyst site.
Well, I agree. That's what I'm saying is I think it's important. It's going to set a standard.
Yeah.
We have to understand what that standard's going to be because it's probably going to affect the entire corridor. And I'm not too sure which, if I might, I think that it's, I think that as a catalyst, getting the river sorted out, getting the river setbacks sorted out and such for that portion of this project is important. But
Yeah,
this-
yeah.
So we have two agencies. FEMA has a line. We have a town that has a different line. Why is there two different lines?
I would say there's a FEMA line and then there's an engineered line, so a hydraulic engineer would go out and actually say, this is where the base flood elevation actually is versus a 70s map that has a big dashed line, and then there's a process to work back with aligning those two. But in development processes that an engineer saying this is a stamped actual 100-year floodplain would supersede the FEMA line, and then the development process would then go back and do a certified landowner modified record to clean up the FEMA line.
And that's a common process.
But the town line was also established as a setback from the river, from not allowing development to be too close to the river.
So down further, okay, that brings up the next, so down where the park site is, that has a different standards from where it is to where their property is?
It's based on elevation. Park is higher up.
So I actually paid.
Go ahead.
I actually paid to have surveying done, and then went through FEMA and a land consultant to make sure the floodplain was where it was supposed to be. So, and I provided that information to the town. So that got a portion of our site out of what was considered the recorded floodplain, and so it gives more ability for more development on the site now. So that is one hurdle we were able to get through and now have information on. But it was a process. It took time and money.
Pam, I think you had a comment that I didn't see.
Yeah, you know, I've been thinking about this dilemma of, after we interviewed people for the Catalyst projects, and then we made recommendations to R2SC, we knew that for Jan's property, well, the business owner's properties on West River Street, that there were many barriers to redevelopment across both of those. I mean, it's complicated, you know, and we talked about this extensively. And it feels to me like, yes, we did recommend the, you know, the adaptive reuse for many reasons. But if through the 5 meetings and the Catalyst committee with the developer has come up with another recommendation, I think we really need to take that seriously. I'm not saying what I agree with, but I think we need more discussion around it, because Jan's property was presented to us as one project. And so, you know, I don't know, maybe Jan, you could clarify a little bit more about the rezoning needs that you feel you need immediately?
We feel like the rezoning is in process, and so we're not that concerned about it, and we now have a possibility of, if we're ready to build, say, housing or mixed use, that we could go through the plan development process. The thing that's stymieing us at this point is river access, river restoration, and the river setback, which, to clarify, only applies to 4 properties in town. And I do recommend that this committee has met on this particular issue. The Economic Vitality Committee did almost an entire meeting of it. The River Access and Health did an entire meeting, and I was part of an R2SC meeting. I think it's a unique opportunity to address it, not only for our property, but the 3 downstream parcels. A couple of the property owners, they're both traveling today. They would be here, but they weren't able to come. So they're very interested in this topic. So I would agree with, I think it was Joan's comment, that I'd feel uncomfortable messing with the River Protection Overlay District for one Catalyst property, but I think there's a unique opportunity to address it for 4 affected properties. And it doesn't affect Mark Tanner's property, and it doesn't affect the downtown property across from Travis's shop.
You say river access, you mean public river access
Well,
on your property?
I think that there's
Is that what's
public and or, I mean, let's say if you put a restaurant or a food truck court, bocce ball or whatever, that's still public access, even though it might be private, right? So it's right now, the property is mostly filled with steep, loose gravel going down into the river. It's not really, it's not accessible to the public. Even
Well,
if
your
you-
property is,
Some parts of it are not, yeah.
but I'm saying, that's a stipulation, you have to have public access to the river on your property?
What I would love to sort out is how to provide both public access and preserve parts of the river, right? It's 1,300 feet of riverfront, and there needs to be a plan and some money spent to both fix it and allow it to manage public access, if that makes sense.
Can I add, I don't know what the right answer is, but just a time machine. And I don't have enough information, I can't recall everything, but I mean, we spent dozens, hundreds of hours, I mean, probably 20 or 30 meetings going through the catalysts to recommendations, and the criteria of the selection of the catalysts, of everyone that was interviewed. Jake was part of it, Jason, Pam. We reviewed everything, and the front the front project of the Truckee River Partners was to catalyze. So the lens that the Economic Vitality Action Team used for the selection and recommendation to town council was narrower and focused at changing the river corridor. One was a short term, Old Trestle. It was medium term, and Tanner was a visionary long term. And also one in the middle, one on far east, far west. So it was really, all the decisions were made to really try to change and build momentum across the river corridor. I'm not disagreeing that maybe the right answer is, doing river restoration and re-looking at the flood line, because it is only the 4 properties, because there's almost three different sets of rules along the river. But the lens we used was very different, so not saying no, but I feel a little bit unprepared. I would want to reconvene, or at least look at the old notes, because if town staff or town council's looking for our thoughts on it, I'm unprepared to provide judgment on it, other than an opinion based on things that were discussed over a year ago, is where I'm at. I'm not disagreeing with it, but I'm just trying to be intellectually honest with the process that was used,
Yeah.
the lens that was looked at for the selection, and being asked tonight.
I think it's true. Of course, everything you're saying is true and accurate, but another really key part of the Catalyst projects was to break the logjam, break the difficulties that those
Yes.
properties were experiencing.
100%.
So I agree about the criteria, the kind of terms and conditions of the projects.
Right.
But we had many, many discussions about we're recommending, we don't approve anything, we're
That's right.
recommending something for which we cannot see the outcome.
Correct.
Like, we absolutely knew that, and I agree wholeheartedly with Pam's comment that if what we're receiving from that Catalyst team is a different approach,
To break log jams.
to break log jams, then, wow, we need to listen.
But I haven't heard why why we can't do adaptive reuse. What are so I'm still very interested in the 2 buildings up front that desperately need to be reused. We desperately need reuse to them. What is prohibiting that from occurring?
Yeah.
Because I understand that there's desire to do something else, and it's a very worthy thing that's being asked, but I don't understand why we can't get to what we set out to do, is to unbreak the log jam on adaptive reuse.
Can I answer that
Yeah.
succinctly? You're also a builder and developer, so to be honest, nobody asked us whether we were ready to plow ahead on that project. It was just one of the potential phase ones, and distinctly remember in the interview that I said, one of the phase ones that we think the first thing we're gonna do is either do this adaptive reuse or do a river restoration project. But we hadn't really sussed out all the barriers. But as we looked at that more closely, and it became, even before town council approved this, I had conversations with both Chris and Jen saying, I'm really worried that we're really focusing on this part of the project because we're not ready to spend millions of dollars to upgrade these buildings until we understand what we can do elsewhere and how we're gonna sort out the river. We didn't buy this project to do an adaptive reuse. I mean, I think it's a great potential use for those buildings. But if we're gonna throw millions of more dollars at this, we need we need to prioritize some of these other things. The other part for us is that, okay, let's say we have this beautiful building up front that has a lot of public use. Now people are trying to get to the river, and now we've got a construction project, and we've got barriers everywhere. We feel like the right first step as the developers working on this for 8 years, that we want to start at the river, and nobody asked us if we really wanted to start at the road.
I understand that. I might, but it was very clear when we got to the point of deciding what the catalyst was. It wasn't the river, it was the buildings. So, I just think we were pretty clear on that we wanted adaptive reuse for those spaces.
Every single meeting I've had with representatives of the Catalyst project, I brought up this concern from the very beginning. So, I do think that the last thing I want to point out is that we're almost out of design workshop money. If we essentially run out, nothing's going to happen, right? I mean, what I'm suggesting is, hey, let's do a little pivot here. It's not an expansion, it's a shift in focus. We're happy to continue funding the design workshop work, and I think we're gonna have a win out of this, because otherwise I think in a few weeks or a few months, we're gonna run out of money, and we're gonna be like, okay, well, that was a good idea, but.
Thank you, Jan, for adding that, because that is, as Jen characterized, the town council discussion was around wanting to hear from this group, because appreciate Jeff and Pam and others have a lot more and Jake have more context, but really being clear that it is, the scope of funds we have and staff time is limited to what we've identified, and so there's not a lot left. So I think also, if the committee wants to move towards, restoration and move towards that, that will be some staff time and some funding left, but a lot of the work will have to happen on the property owners, funding. And it sounds like they're interested, which is great, but I think just being honest about that, and also looking at the 4 properties with the 75-foot setback, that is not in council's work plan right now. So I don't know when there would be time and staff capacity for that too. So I think also just being honest about what we're able to accomplish with the remainder of this contract, what the property owner's interested in doing, and then kind of letting the committee weigh in. So appreciate this discussion, and it's good to hear everybody's thoughts.
Can I ask, where does your new housing fit into this timeline, and is part of the reason you're reluctant to do the renovation of the old buildings because of lost rental revenue during the renovation?
Well, I think you touched on a couple things that are accurate. One is that the existing flex buildings do provide revenue that helps us pay for design workshop time and other consultant time. So that's actually a revenue source for us that we can divert towards developing. And then a housing project, we actually would love to build a housing project again. We believe that starting at the river fixing that up and then doing a housing project versus a housing project and then fix up the river. It doesn't, you know, it's almost like, as anybody who's involved with watershed council stuff, this is major earth moving
Right.
type
So you're
stuff.
really talking about doing restoration first?
Yeah, that's my goal.
That's what you keep saying.
You led us
Keep
into
saying it.
the conversation.
Okay.
Can I say one
Yeah,
more
yeah.
piece? I think, I did wanna highlight it as R3 playbook, which is restore, revive, reimagine, I think. So restoration is hugely important, but I did wanna I don't think that it is the number one goal. We didn't say 1, 2, 3, so when we're thinking about all these, I think valid questions, Joan. And again, I'm not saying that it's not worthwhile, that might make sense, but I think that's important too. It's all of these things together, not just river restoration first.
Other comments?
I think the river restoration, portion of it would really, be a step toward what should we be doing, what can we be doing there with the river? Because we still haven't decided what setback we want. If I'm reading this right in the committee that I've been on, we still don't know whether it's gonna be 75 feet back or 1 foot.
Well, can the restoration occur without that? I don't know that those two things are mutually exclusive.
Well, that's been confusing to me. I
Yeah,
am
are
unclear.
they mutually exclusive? Do you
So-
need that answer?
So I think as Jake said, if you do restore the river, you're in essence moving that floodplain down. So all that river restoration then, and if you keep the 75 feet, then the diagram that says, here's your undevelopable land, also shifts to the east. So.
And you're saying that because there's so much fill? The
No,
fill
no,
would be
just because of the
removed?
code. So just because of the 75-foot setback, if we remove that fill,
Yeah.
then we're essentially grading down, so that elevation, the location of the elevation on the plan shifts to the east. And with it would shift that 75-foot setback.
Would it be,
If
could
you
it be memorialized where it is?
Can we say the
Yeah.
step back one more time, cause I feel like if
Yeah.
we've lost Lisa,
Yeah,
we've
can it
lost
just be
everybody.
Memorialized where it is?
I think what you're saying is, and essentially that's what, in some of the restoration plans that we've been looking at, almost does, is essentially say, all that hatched area would be restored, but with moving the location of the floodplain, the distance of the setback is shorter, is tinier, so that you don't essentially push that out. You're just saying, I'm gonna restore that all instead of keeping it all as open space. So your setback would be smaller, but I think if I understood you right, Joan, you're saying, if we said memorialize this location of
Right.
this
Grandfather,
orange setback,
yeah.
we're not gonna develop any more than what's here currently.
Yeah.
It does
If
on
we
the-
wanted to move forward with the idea of doing the restoration, but not trying to address this bigger 75-foot issue, could that occur? Because we're talking about a catalyst site still, we're not talking about the 4 lots, we're not talking about the broader assessment, we're talking about a catalyst site. So could you say, yes, we agree to work on planning of restoration on the catalyst site without addressing the issue of the 75-foot setback?
I would think it would be hard for someone to say that without some kind of understanding that you're not going to encumber the rest of their parcel.
You don't
It's-
shrink the
you're
building,
not
the
gonna
current
make
buildable
it
area.
undevelopable in the
Yeah.
future.
But-
Right.
Yeah, we talked about that when we made the recommendation. It was very complicated.
Yes.
That was another reason for a recommendation.
At some point, we'd have to address this.
Well, I agree, but I don't think it's a catalyst site, so that's why I think those are two different issues that need to be addressed separately. The question is, on the table, what are we gonna do with the catalyst site and the project that, what catalyst project do we have? Are we gonna pivot, or are we gonna, almost stop where we are?
So, could I ask the property owners a question?
Yep, yeah, absolutely.
Do you have the funding to do the Catalyst project?
The
When
restoration?
you say
The
the funding, you're-
restoration.
the restoration.
Do you have the funding?
We believe we definitely have the funding to plan it and do at least a phase one. And we believe that, in fact, we know there's quite a bit of state funding that has been released with Prop 4 that could do part of it. And that's not to say that we couldn't fund it, it's just, it has to pencil out. I
Can I-
mean,
How does it ever pencil out?
Wait, can I clarify, just before we get too far? Because restoration, are we talking river restoration or rehab of the buildings? What was your question?
I'm starting right now with River.
River
But
restoration,
my
okay.
next question is going to be the rehab of the buildings.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were talking about the same
But
thing.
it's really important that this group knows that, I feel, everybody, if the funding's there for both of those options.
I don't think the funding's there unless that 75, I don't know why there's two lines. And I think that you're taking 75 feet because of an engineer that's different from the FEMA line. On 4 properties, you're devaluing all 4 of those properties. And is the funding there with 75 feet gone? Probably not.
No.
I mean, probably not. That's an elephant in the room. Let's just talk about that. So that's gotta be changed. He's gotta have a place to go to or he's never gonna go anywhere. So I think I can answer the question for him. We've taken 75 feet of their property because our town engineer said that that's where the flood line is. Different from FEMA. Why is that? Why do we have 2 government agencies with 2 conflicting stories? 75 feet difference. If somebody came to your house, Pam, and said, I'm taking 75 feet of your property.
Travis, that's not what the 75
Yeah.
setback is, it's a different thing. There's an acknowledgement by the town of the, let's call it the FEMA floodplain line, that's a little confusing itself, but the FEMA floodplain line. So the town acknowledges that line. And then the town said sometime in the past,
A long time ago, prior to their purchasing the property.
we're going to additionally have from that floodplain line, a 75-foot setback.
Just on those 4 properties.
Yes.
But then the neighbor adjacent to it, the Stratton property, is the same.
That's right, but it was
So-
done a really long time ago.
But-
And yes, it has to, and it needs to be addressed, and we all agree it needs to be
Correct.
addressed, but it's not the Catalyst project.
Right.
That's a different project.
But the money is probably not there without, I mean, like egg, cart for the horse.
So
maybe we can
We
get,
have the property owners here, and thank you all for being here. So, 2 questions. If we pivot, if we would choose to talk about pivoting as a committee, because we did recommend this to town council, for restoration, do you have the funding? And secondly, our recommendation was the review of the adaptive reuse. It was adaptive reuse. Do you have the funding to do that?
So that's a 2 very separate questions.
Right.
And we have the funding to push through with some help from the town to plan the restoration project. We believe that the first phase, that restoration project is likely to go in probably 3 phases. And we have the funding to do the first phase. To Travis's point, if we don't have resolution of at least on our property, the 75-foot setback, however we work it out, we're not gonna be incentivized to spend that money and to do the work. We also think that the second and third phase, which is likely to be more expensive, it may also include some horse trading with the town for public access, public park, that kind of thing. We think that there's a fair amount of public resources, state money that would be available for that, for those phases that are considerably more expensive. The second part, the question about the adaptive reuse. Yes, we don't have any issues with funding the adaptive reuse. The biggest question for us is whether or not it actually pencils out, if that makes sense. Like, you know, when I talked to Ciro Mancuso, for example, a about this project. He's like, you're crazy, you should just tear it down and start over, right? And who am I to say that Ciro Mancuso doesn't have a lot of experience with that kind of thing? So, you know, again, we did spend probably 10, 15,000, well, probably close to $20,000. We've got the engineering for those adaptive reuse project. We've got this beautiful drawings. Does it make sense financially to build it? If it does, we have the money. But we have serious concerns about whether it actually makes sense, particularly as you start looking at the streetscape improvements, undergrounding power, you know, dealing with bike lanes. We thought it might be easy to deal with that, but it's actually a giant can of worms out there, because as soon as you start dealing with public infrastructure, it's very expensive. More expensive.
But I think we're learning a lot, like that, so,
Yeah.
you know, like, we asked the question because we wanted to know what the barriers to entry were.
Yes.
And you're telling us what they are, and that is not very different from what we learned from BAE in their studies, that existing rents are so high that there's not much additional incentive to do adaptive reuse.
Right.
So, I mean, like, the lessons that we set out to learn have been learned from this catalyst experiment.
So let us hope that if, in fact, that catalyst project, the two garages areas, ever are going to be improved, it may take the whole property to make it pencil out, because the profits from the river part will help fund the restoration. So where do we go with this from there? He asked originally, probably for that reason, because he had a project that would help pay for the restoration of those buildings in the long run, and the streetscape and everything else that goes with it. So how do we work with that?
Yeah, I have one more question for Jan, though. Correct me, did you just say, though, that if the 75-foot line is not dealt with, you wouldn't have the incentive to do the river restoration?
Well, I think we just need to create clarity. You had suggested a potential alternative, but Stephanie's correct in that if, from the letter of the law, if we were to expand the floodplain, we would essentially be moving our developable envelope even further into the property, and you know, so that's an important.
Yeah, I understand that of being a disincentive to the restoration.
I want to add one thing, though, that, to be fair, when I was pitching that Catalyst project, we had these beautiful plans, and I was actually probably amongst the minority in our partners saying, hey, this is a really great potential first step. And one of the partners, bless his soul, kept saying, you're crazy, you know, like, that's gonna cost, you know, so much money, and we're already getting rent from it, and all this. The Catalyst project process fleshed that out for me clear as day, right? And if seems like there was a pivot, it happened pretty early on, because Jen knows, because it was my birthday, March 25th, when we were, last year, having a conversation where I was freaking out, saying, hey, I'm a little worried about this project focusing on this part. It's why we also wrote the RFP to explore issues with the neighboring parcel. But it's been helpful, but it's
Is the adaptive reuse the thing you have to do, or is it, you know, it looks to me like the best thing to do with those buildings is to bulldoze them away, that they're not reusable. So, I mean, is there a financial, I mean, adaptive reuse is good if it works financially and all that, but if the buildings aren't
I think you answered your own question. I mean, it really, it only will be done if makes financial sense, right? And,
Right.
and at the time we were pitching, at least I didn't necessarily have that information.
So, I know that when in our discussions, that this adaptive reuse was a great idea, and for a lot of properties it would be, but I'm wondering is that a deal breaker one way or the other, whether you have to adaptively reuse them, or is there another option, or is that it, as far as the Catalyst project goes?
I want to be clear that I haven't given up on the idea of adaptive reuse. I just think at the moment it's not the first priority but to answer your question, I mean, I don't think that anybody's forcing us to do anything with the property, and that's the problem on some level, right?
That's funny. We're that kind of town, though.
Can
So
I ask
just
one,
wanted,
in the interest of time, if you pivoted, all three Catalyst projects were chosen to do very specific things, what would the river restoration do if your partnership pivoted? How would it be a catalyst to the community? What would it be doing?
Well, I think it's really the first step for our whole project to be redeveloped. I mean, whether
No, I understand. What would it be doing it for the community? Because the Catalyst projects weren't chosen holistically. They were all, yours was very specific where the road bends to activate so the community could see things changing. Old Trestle was close, same thing. So those two, and they're not too far, and we walked the ground. Those two were chosen very specifically to catalyze, and back to, in terms of rents, most of the landowners on the river own it outright. They're getting rent. It's too difficult to change it unless you catalyze the economic incentive to all of a sudden now your project goes, Old Trestle goes, the partners, the owners around there, now there's economic incentive to begin changing the land without doing it old 1960s eminent domains, etc. So it's a bottom-up driven approach. So what, for Truckee River Partners, if you pivoted, how would it catalyze the river corridor?
I would say if we've identified clearly our biggest barrier to redeveloping that property, and that property as a whole is kind of exhibit A of what we've failed to do over the last 34 years. So by starting with the river, we actually want to, right on the heels of that, be looking at housing, looking at either adaptive reuse of the building or tearing it down and doing something better. You know, in the area that was shown as just wasteland, I mean, it's basically paving and damaged property. And I think there's a mixed use project that we would love to get going. We've identified, I think, the biggest pain point that is the easiest to push forward in the next, say, 12 to 18 months. And that's where we want to focus, and we want all of us to celebrate instead of just shutting the Catalyst project down because we're running out of money.
How much staff time and money is left with public funds?
It's in the staff report, off the top of my head, consultant time less than 10,000?
So, go for it.
That's a day.
I just
Sorry.
want to take a poll of our, like, do you feel like we can come to a decision tonight on this? Or is it something that we would like to table and come back to at another time?
$8,300.
I know, we gotta make a decision tonight,
Yeah,
$8,300.
I think for $8,300, it's a lot of money, but I think in the big picture, this is, it's not that much.
Okay.
Within this context,
Yes.
so,
Well,
I think it's de minimis.
I'm still, I mean, we leave him with very few options if we don't at some point decide where the lines are.
Well, I don't disagree we have to decide where the lines are. I just don't think it's a Catalyst project. And I don't think we should be spending Catalyst money on that. I think that's a planning You know, maybe it has a focus on R2SC, maybe we should have a subcommittee that studies it and makes a recommendation. I just don't think it falls in the Catalyst project.
Just for a
You
minute
guys
to
can-
clarify.
And that's why I was
You
asking
guys-
Jan
I
what
know,
the
and you guys
catalyst
can argue with
is.
me like,
No,
tell
No,
me
no,
how
no,
it
no,
does.
yeah.
Just to clarify, there is separately in the playbook an action plan for resolving
Yes.
the whole.
There is.
There
I
is.
mean.
I agree
so,
completely.
yeah.
It's there. I know it's
Yeah.
there. We said we
And
tabled
it's-
it.
And you're right, it was not in the scope of the Catalyst project.
It was not. I know it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so part of me says, table the Catalyst until we solve that, and then come back, because if we don't solve that, he said he doesn't have the incentive to do the restoration.
That's what I'm saying.
So then, is there even a reason to spend the $8,300
Right.
until you solve but can you just table it for, until, like, should we just pivot as a committee and say, let's go form another subcommittee to do the 4-lot
River
river
floodplain.
issue? Solve the river floodplain issue.
Yeah.
Can I suggest a yes and? I mean, I think a lot of we've already spent a fair amount of our own money sorting out not only our floodplain, but the one down river, and activating our neighbors to actually engage in this process. I think the work that we would like to do, and there's only $8,300. I mean, if you don't want to spend the $8,300 and you want us to spend the money, then, you know, it's really not a game changer for us. What's more important is that the Catalyst project is not put on hold, and that we have the relationship with the staff, that we've definitely got more staff time involved. We'd like to engage with them on that. We would love to see the R2SC form a subcommittee to sort out the other action item, you know, I mean, I realize that's staff time and all that, so it's not easy to do, but that would be a parallel process. I think that our project needs to come forward as an example of what's possible with amended setback.
Could I ask one
Yeah,
more question? So, if I heard you correctly, when I asked you the question about funds available for adaptive reuse, you said you do not have any problem, quote unquote, with funding. And the real issue that's unfolded has to do with streetscape and public infrastructure.
You mean on the adaptive reuse project?
On the adaptive reuse, so I wanna come back to that.
It's a pretty substantial, big potential issue. Yeah.
So the good news is that we've learned this.
Right.
Now we're talking catalysts again. We recommended that, adaptive reuse. What can be done to help incentivize with both streetscape and public infrastructure to do the adaptive reuse? I mean, when we're talking about big picture, anyone else who's going to develop is going to have the same issue.
Right.
I will say there's going to be, I'm just educating, that there is a measure on everyone's ballot, Measure K, I believe, June 2nd, which is renewing the sales tax that goes to roads that helps fund a lot of public infrastructure projects.
Yeah, but we can't wait for that.
I know.
But that's a good point.
I think the answer is, if that is it ultimately, how that happens is it ends up in a CIP project. There's usually a CFD conversation. You look at West River, the town funded streetscape piece, and then the CFD was formed to fund the maintenance and the ongoing costs of that. We're looking at that potentially downtown in a CFD for that. Jaboom
Right.
Street's on the list. Or
Brickletown was.
Jaboom, Church Street. That's the process, is the CIP route of what that could look like. But I hesitated because that's not a today fix.
But to me, like, there's already a valid report here about where we're at on West River Street for adaptive reuse.
Yeah.
Like, I've learned kind of, it's validated a lot of what we thought.
Right.
It's brought up some other issues that we've, haven't really quantified, but now we can. I think, like, we've gotten a lot of the information we were looking for as what the issues are on West River Street. And, how we're gonna solve them is a huge other problem. But, like, this was what we set out to do, is get information. And what are those hurdles that are in front of every owner along the way?
So we identified those, but one of the key things in thinking about that river was to encourage development.
Absolutely.
And,
Right.
and we can't just put this on hold. So I'm trying to say, what do we do next? Because I don't wanna leave here tonight with this project being put on hold, period.
Well, you have $8,300 though.
How much has been
The
spent already?
The very next step with the riverfront, Jen mentioned it, but it's a CIP. It's a community improvement, or CID, is it some community?
CFD.
CFD.
CFD, Community
CFD,
Facilities.
Community Facilities District?
Yeah.
Is
Acronyms, all the acronyms.
Gotta have an acronym.
Back to the Follies.
that right?
Yeah.
Straight from there.
We early on recognized that as a multi-year process, right? I mean, at best. It's probably, the way we look at it is that this committee probably could sort out with some data, the 75-foot setback. The zoning is in process with the housing element, and the community improvement district or community facilities district is, likely to happen, but years after that, most likely, for that part of town. I'm just guessing.
Probably.
I just see this Catalyst project as just it's a different order of steps that the developer now wants to take, because he gets eventually to renovation. And what he's saying, it makes more sense for his project to do the river restoration and the setback, to address that first in order to eventually accomplish the renovation. So I see as we can go ahead and say we're gonna recommend that we move ahead on renovation, but it doesn't look like the developer's gonna do it. So we do wanna see the river restoration, do want to address the setback. I'd say bless them and let them go forth. with
Yeah,
their
I mean,
endorsement.
just to be clear, I think you do understand this, but just to be clear, $8,300 is not gonna be on the groundwork.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
right,
Oh,
like
yeah,
we're
no, it
clear on
doesn't
that,
cover
yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
phase one. I don't really know what phase one is.
Yeah.
I
So
don't
the
know that they
$8,300
know yet,
would go
but-
for those definitions.
Does the $8,300 also include Mark's project?
No.
No.
He has a separate
Separate
bucket.
budget?
For
No,
whatever
I'm
reason,
looking at
Mark's
Jan
budget
Holland's
was a little bit fatter than our budget, but that's all right.
The complexity of this project was discussed
Yeah.
at length when we were going through selection process, which is very specifically what was scoped down as well.
Yeah.
Because there's a housing density issue, there's a floodplain issue, there's a restoration issue,
Right.
there are lot line issues, there's multiple overlay. So this was selected as the highest best use of community public funds to catalyze the corridor. Because everything being said tonight is all true.
Right.
It's complicated,
Yeah.
but it was scoped narrowly as best we could, we thought,
Right.
with the developers to, so.
So where do you
So-
gotta
Any
go,
other
guys? Where do you wanna go with it?
I don't know that
You wanna
$8,500 does anything for anything we're talking about at all, but I think there's, quite honestly, it doesn't
I
do
agree.
anything, I mean, it's de minimis.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's worth discussing if R2SC wants to look at, or if the town has appetite, or council looking at the floodplain for those 4 properties, cause there's, as I recall, there's 3 rule sets along the river. These 4 properties, as depicted on the slide, is the most complicated one. You know, maybe that's something that I think that's outside the scope of what's even on the agenda tonight.
Yep.
If we're gonna treat it like a Brown Act.
Yeah, it's not on the agenda, but it's the elephant in the room, and,
Right. And we're not Brown Act. We said we were gonna spirit and intent to the Brown Act.
Yes. And it needs to be resolved, and we need, I think, some more expert input to it, before I could make a decision. But it's very important to future development of the river corridor.
So, can we table that part and just focus back to the catalyst? And what does the group want to do with the $8,300 on the catalyst side? Do we want to continue to focus it on the adaptive reuse portion, or do we want to pivot and let it go to the restoration project?
One thing I would like to request, and this may be embedded already and I'm not aware, but one thing I would like to request is that there's a clear slide deck or report that articulates the, like, everyone says it's complicated, we know it's complicated, but we just spent a year and 18 months, whatever, working on it. Here's how it's complicated. So whether that's in or out of the 1,800, I'm not clear, but I really think we should, that should be.
I think that should be true for all of the catalyst
Yes.
sites.
Okay.
That we
Yes.
should end up with a report that,
Yes.
what were the barriers?
Right.
What were the
That sounds like a great use of the
opportunities?
$8,300,
Yeah.
is to,
What's in it?
is to catalog the lessons learned.
Can I offer something I think is generous, but it might not be, my partners may or may not agree, but since I'm the managing partner, I'll offer that I would love to see the $8,300 not be, it's totally irrelevant to this conversation.
Yes.
And we're happy to fund all of Design Workshop's time moving forward on this. If the $8,300 could be shifted to help, and I think it actually go a long ways towards giving this committee data on the 4 properties, I guess what I wanna do is offer that it'd be fine with us if the $8,300 was shifted, Design Workshop's $8,300 was shifted downstream and helped you sort out this 4 property.
Sort out what?
So,
The
I
floodplain.
wanna just confirm, because that I'm hearing a little bit of conflicting information. That would mean that we put the Catalyst project on hold. So wait, and that you hire Design Workshop independently, but you will lose staff coordination with that.
That's not what I.
Okay, so that's why I wanna make sure that we're all saying the same thing, is that, because.
The most valuable part of this project, and that's not to, Design Workshop's been great, but we've hired Design Workshop in the past. They've done great work for us in the past. Our problem was having good collaborative work with the town, so that is very important. I don't want you to
Okay.
table the
So,
Catalyst project.
That's why I clarified it. I don't think the $8,300 in Design Workshop's gonna do much for the other 4 parcels. What they really need is staff time to be freed up as well, so
Yeah.
it is that,
I get it.
you get it.
Yeah,
I
and
know
may-
you do.
And maybe it's, we'll take the $8,300, we definitely appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's just, what I didn't want people to, there seems to be concern that the $8,300 isn't gonna go very far, but we want the project to continue and we wanna invest in that.
Okay.
I think, I hate to belabor this, but, it is, in addition to the 8,300, there are 60 hours of economic vitality staff and 18 hours of community development staff left. So it's
Okay.
that combination of
Okay.
those.
Thank you. It is what I thought
Yeah.
there.
Is that for all 3 of them?
No, just for
No.
Truckee River
Just-
Partners.
So, given we're back to the same question, do we wanna pivot and let the restoration go forward? We wanna keep it on adaptive reuse?
Of the town allocated resources.
Yes.
What, in everyone's opinion, is in the best interest of this community?
Good point.
what makes the playbook
Exactly.
actionable.
Yes. Taking town council's thoughts.
And what happens when the money,
consideration
what happens when the
before-
money and the times run out on this catalyst
Then
project?
they have to pay. They either, if they wanna continue on.
Then they're just
they-
on their own to do it like anybody else would.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's no guarantee that happens.
Right.
And I'm asking us to think about what's in the best interest of the community and how we make this decision.
There's no guarantee that what happens. You
When
s-
the money runs out, I mean, Jan, I hope we'll be able to pay for it, but we can't count on that as a committee.
But we also don't know that, what we want is the information.
That's correct.
Because we have no control over any of the work
Right.
that actually gets done.
So Jeff asked us in a different way a little bit earlier, what's the
What's the public benefit?
yeah, what's the public benefit? You've asked it again.
Mhm.
So I think in considering that, both what you asked, and the very first thing we talked about tonight with the planned development process followed by the part 2 long-term process, right? I think gaining, the tricky part is gonna be to scope this.
Right.
Small, but to gain some more insight on the complexity, gain some more insight on the solution to the floodplain complexity actually is important. So I'm not talking about the restoration. What I'm suggesting right now is to understand the floodplain complexity, the setback complexity, and they would be very preliminary recommendations, but some preliminary recommendations come forward.
And that, Lisa, I just need to know this in my head because it's not there. What would impact Jan or that catalyst project, this work would also impact the other 4 properties.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for us to, I mean, that would be the goal.
Right.
That would be the goal.
But you're only working with one property owner.
I understand.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of the pivot and the
Yeah,
community benefit.
And the ability to generalize the information
Right,
to the other
because catalyst
parcels.
projects were to,
I mean, it's so hard, we're doing it by committee and we don't have a scope and,
Right.
it's a little hard.
exactly.
But,
Why wouldn't we just take it to the term, to the end of the line, collect all that data? It's only $8,300, and then at the end of that,
yeah, that's another option, of
That's
course.
an option, yeah.
Of
That's
course it
another
is.
option.
I think too, Jen, what I heard you say is what's left, not that just the 8,300, 60 hours of economic vitality, which is Carissa and 18 of community development. I also don't hear that's not the floodplain experts of 60 hours of time.
Right, right.
So that's something else, it wouldn't just be a total apples to apples staff time.
Right.
So that's something, and that falls on Jen to work with the team to decide, but that is,
Good
We
point.
also assume that if we run out of community development time or Carissa's time, that we'd be billed for that time, to move the project forward, so we're not gonna be dead in the water when we're out of that time, assuming they still wanna work with us.
And that they have the time,
Yeah.
right? There's a capacity piece. Steph?
I just think the most important thing is the answer to the setback, where it is, and then
Yeah. I just think it has to, this isn't the right vehicle.
Yeah.
The Catalyst project is not the right vehicle to do that.
As
I don't
reluctant
disagree.
as I am to agree with, I mean, it's just hard, 60, 80 hours of staff time and
Yeah.
I understand that there would be additional contribution from the partners, I'm understanding that, but
well,
it's tough.
my fear is that it just isn't going to happen until there's an answer to that, and I'm not sure how we get there or who's supposed to do it. But my God, it's such an important thing.
and can I offer one thing real quick, Jen? Just also, I don't want it to sound like council's like, oh, we have no time, we can't do any of this. Like, one thing we can offer is in our next work plan update, put this up as a bike rack item, which is items any council members can bring up that are not in the work plan, and then the rest of council has to discuss, and it would give us trade-offs, we'd have to probably drop something else from our work plan.
And we have 2 council members.
Right, so we're hearing that, so that is something that we can bring forward as an option,
really
like, I'm
good.
hearing the importance of this from everyone. But again, again, I don't think it's an apples to apples, we have 80 hours of staff time, we can just go forward. It would be a longer process to.
Right, I'm ignoring that. I'm trying to get to a solution.
I know, but, okay.
Can I make a recommendation?
The solution here is the community needs an answer, property owners need an answer, and it does have to do with the catalyst. Because they asked originally to be one big piece of the catalyst, because they knew that's what made it work.
Can I
So,
make, sorry to interrupt you.
But it was turned down.
it was turned down, I understand that, but,
Can I maybe propose a compromise?
sure.
Mhm.
Are we all
Love it.
feeling ready to compromise? I mean, maybe you see why this came back, is we were very unclear with what to do. I think what we've heard from the property owner very clearly is there's value in what's left in the contract, whether that's design workshop and then they augment it. Sounds like more value even in the staff time and the partnership in terms of getting meetings arranged. You could consider giving just a broader parameter to work through the remaining contract, continue to learn more, whether it's about adaptive reuse, whether it's about floodplain issues, river restoration, with that time and money that's left. That, the contract amount is not a ton, so it's not gonna be a ton of time. You might glean a little bit more information out of that and kind of wrap this up with what we've committed to do. At that point, you get the report of these are all the things we've learned. And we have learned a lot about adaptive reuse. I think that's true. Council may choose to add it into their bike rack at a future discussion in terms of the 75 foot. Maybe that's better informed at that point if we continue with just a broader scope. I think our fear was we would come back to the end and have it expanded and you all be caught off guard that we expanded, or upset that we didn't because we held firm to that. So we were just wanting to have you all have a chance to weigh in, but I'm not hearing general consensus other than the interest of the property owners, and it sounds like they think there's value in whatever else we can glean from this. If you're okay with just.
Are they good with that?
Is that a compromise to a difficult question?
Why not?
I'm good.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I got a one on it from staff.
Okay.
Okay, good. We agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's a graceful solution for the meeting, and I hope that the staff and the property owners don't just feel like we kicked the can down the road. you
Yeah.
know? Yeah. But
Okay.
what you've done is you've gained agreement from us to open up the door to whatever potentially can be done around the setback issue. Could be included, and we'll all be happy with that.
Yeah.
Well, we have another agenda item, just a little one. And I just I don't know what's the temperature of the room and the staff and.
And guess there might be members of the public that have
Yeah,
stayed because
because
they're
of that.
interested in this
Yes.
item.
Yes, there are. So if everybody's good staying, we'll just keep going. Okay, great.
The question.
Let's just go. Let's just do it the right way.
Set a time limit, so we're not here.
Yeah,
for a long
let's,
time.
is everyone good with 8:30 as the time limit? Okay, 8:30. 45 minutes.
All right, so the question at hand here that the town council has asked for some input on is the east parcel from Dabe Muley Park. That park is, as you can see, just at right by the pedestrian bridge. It's circled in red on the upper right graphic. Here it is also highlighted generally in red. This is general location, not parcel location. It's a half-acre site. Currently, it's zoned downtown mixed use. That zoning would allow for 6 to 12 residential units. There's some utilities in the northern portion. There's some other constraints physically around the site with snow storage and other easement pieces. And really the question that is posed to the committee is thinking about what the use might be. There had been a proposal for commercial use. That use is rescinded right now, so council is looking for input from the R2SC on what this parcel might be. Some considerations is that it is really the transition between the park and both the West River Street streetscape and then also the surrounding neighborhood, and it does shape that park edge experience. When we looked back at the R3 playbook, some of the character description pieces that had been identified through the playbook was about, the historical, eclectic Truckee River feel, that it's connected to downtown, it should be a walkable area with great public spaces, it should complement the park, have connection, at least visual connection to, and celebrate the river, envisioning a mix of a variety of types of uses, commercial, office, lodging, and residential uses. I think the key piece when we had talked about this downtown mixed use river district it was similar to downtown, but it could incorporate more residential than downtown, that there was this housing piece of it. So thinking about, scale of buildings like you see here, or similar to this example in Eagle, Idaho, where it's stepped back, that you don't feel too much of the density of mixed use, but that idea of just opportunities within this area. Other examples, Steamboat Springs, Colorado, again, this is the idea of like stepping back in a historical neighborhood, or the Trout Creek district, this is a conceptual rendering from one of those proposals of housing. So thinking about the scale of housing that could be thought about here. Design Workshop was asked to look at the parcel to consider, what residential might look like on this site if it was a residential use on this eastern portion of the site. This site plan is very conceptual, it's just to essentially look at what that might look like. The site plan essentially looks at both live-work type units, so it could still have some kind of activated front with the streetscape connecting to the park and along West River Street, along with just more townhouse type units. The yield here was about 7 units. Again, the allowable units on the parcel would be 6 to 12, so we're in the lower range of the allowable units. You could go denser if you want. And looking at essentially, again, 3-story type developments, you can see a section here on the left, that A is the streetscape going towards the park on the right. But really, I think the focus here is around conversation, understanding, what type of, when thinking about this site, council would like input, and staff can help give some color to this, but looking for input on what, if housing would be an acceptable use, mixed use, what type of use might be considered. And so some questions that you might think of as you think about what is appropriate, you could think about, what role should this site itself play in the overall corridor? What would complement the park? Should it be an expansion of the park? Could it be housing? Could that be a piece of it? What are some of those nearby uses and how this site fits in, essentially?
And so what happens with this information we're gonna discuss tonight?
It'll go back to council. So council needs to make a determination about what to do with the site. We could expand the park, we could do housing, they could go through the RFI process again for another commercial development. Preliminary feedback from council at a pretty high level was we heard a lot from the community about that level of activation, and the neighborhood's not particularly interested in that. So they asked that we explore like maybe some housing, like get some concepts to see what that looked like, or expand the park. I think if this committee wanted them to reconsider, we could take that back, but ultimately they're hoping for some guidance on if there's a preference from this committee. You might not have a preference, and that's
So, yeah, sorry, just to drill down one more time. So are they asking for guidance from us, or a preliminary thoughts, and it like, what would be your guess? Yeah.
I
What's
think
the
that
status of the information really that we're gonna give them?
if you are able to get to a recommendation, then we would present it as a recommendation. If you are only able to offer limited time, these are thoughts that we heard, we would share them as that. So, I mean, ideally a recommendation, but I don't know if you can't get there, that's okay.
questions?
I have a lot of thoughts about it.
Do you have thoughts or questions?
You want questions?
Or
Yes.
questions first?
Okay. We'll put a question mark at the end. I guess my question is, given the development of the park and the surrounding area, the bridge and all that, that's really defined that area differently than it was when it was an empty lot. That, can we go back to the drawing board with what to do with that? Can we, I mean, I know the original plan was to have some development there, commercial, whatever, and can we go back further and say, there's enough of a change of circumstances here, and let's go back to the drawing board and look at what is in the best community interest for that piece of land.
That's what we're doing now.
Yeah, so,
So yes,
so are we saying?
That's what we're saying.
Are you saying then that everything's on the board?
yes.
We can say, leave the shavings there and let it be, to, let's build a 6-story apartment building.
Yes.
Essentially, I think there would be hesitation to just leave the shavings there, and would probably want to plant some grass or
could
put
say
some
that,
other
though.
things, but you could, yeah. I mean, there is the opportunity to say, just extend the park over, or just put some grass there and call it a day.
Yeah, so,
That's what this conversation will
Yeah.
help inform the council discussion.
Other questions?
so we got questions.
No questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I went back to try to find where housing was ever being proposed for this, what was then the county courtyard. And I couldn't find it. The best I could find was in the most detail I could find was in the 2005 River Revitalization Strategy. And that said, in this area, a major civic plaza should be constructed to serve as a gathering place for festivals and events to provide general access to the river. And it says it could be an urban space as opposed to other places where a more natural character would be maintained. And then it says commercial uses could line the street edge to frame the plaza and shield the plaza from traffic and noise. And then you know from the submission you made that you're originally thinking of doing a commercial, a retail development there on that plan we're talking about now, and the other one, Andy and Alicia Barr doing that trestle. And I haven't heard, I didn't see anywhere in any of those prior community meetings where they talked about essentially turning it into private habitations. And so.
No, in both in
that's a
2000
question, did I miss something?
No. In 2011 and in 2017, the RFPs went out to find businesses that could activate the park setting. That was kind of the specific language, to provide complementary businesses to a park so that the park had a life, had a life.
Okay.
And it brought life to the park.
Okay.
And Lisa was on the selection committee, and
Okay.
that's probably
That's my question. It's a long question.
Our 3 playbook does identify housing.
No, we were specifically excluded from talking about this parcel.
Well,
In
sorry,
our
not on
3
this parcel, sorry,
Okay,
but in like,
okay.
In the district.
in the district, exactly.
But I
in
think it's
the
important
reviving.
that we
Totally, yes.
we said off limits.
Because there was already
Yeah, there was a plan.
plans, yeah.
Yeah, so now it's back, now it's on the table. And
Well, I don't think it should be on the table. I think it should be individual input.
Should we hear public comment before we?
Yeah, deliberate,
Go into
yes,
deliberation.
Are there
yes.
other
I'm just
questions?
responding to you,
Yeah,
Jen.
so, you're right. Questions? Public comment,
I have so many comments.
okay.
It's
You've been so quiet.
Chris, I know.
Christine Crone, and I do have a vested interest as I'm a resident near the park. And to one question or one aspect about public opinion, for example, if I've talked to maybe 100 or hundreds of people in the community, the assumption is the park is finished. The assumption is that the park is a park, and everyone's very happy that the town has provided such. There's no information, well, the information I'm sure is out there, but there's not an understanding that there's more to come. And it has been wholly embraced that it is a park. To another aspect about the activation of the area, I think passive activation is a term about if you continue the park and it's used as, I mean, there are a lot of ways, like Jan had mentioned, this plaza, to activate it's already been activated. I mean, it's used, it's a wonderful thing. It's the legacy trail, there's a trail system, families are using it, dogs are using it. Anyway, it is being utilized more and more, and it can continue to be activated as a community, as a public interest by putting in perhaps, I'm not sure, but by not developing it into commercial space. When I look at these images for ideas for housing or the commercial entity, those are rather tall buildings. If you put a tall building, that'll shade what's left of the tiny park, and that's it. There goes the activation. You're just stuffing commercial development in a very small spot, and it doesn't seem like the appropriate area for those kind of considerations for housing, houses that are smaller than the little green ghetto. Well, that's a whole other thing, but I just, yeah.
The green ghetto?
We all know where it is. It was like perfectly.
I think there are a
It's
lot
spaghetti.
of, there are uses that would benefit the community, and that could be a food and beverage on a smaller scale, where there are beverages or a pop-up of some sort, but really to continue to allow it to be a public land and publicly used and open. And that would tick all the boxes in the playbook in terms of the access to the river, bringing the community, in the passive activity.
Thank you.
I think that's it, yeah.
Thanks, Kristen. Lucas McClelland, I'm a property owner on Riverside Drive as well. And what Kristen said is true. People are already using this space as a park. And so every evening, it's completely parked up with people that are walking the dogs and they're walking the river. And Travis can attest that there's lots of people utilizing that area already.
They're using the bathroom.
Right, exactly right. That was a good move. So, and the thing is that even the wood chip area is being used by people now. And so we have 4 lots adjacent to that we could build housing on if we were to get out of the way and allow those buildings to be demolished and something built for the community. I don't think we need housing in this parcel. The other thing is it kind of goes against the town guidelines of keeping that river space open, because you can see the river area from Donner Pass Road, and it draws people over there to the park. I've seen people walk all the way around just to get over there to be by the river. So I think we're drawing people in by having it open, and it's activating that area by having it open. The other thing is that TDRPD wants to build a handicapped accessible park, and Spen didn't think I was funny when I said it was a pretty inaccessible spot that they're trying to build it on, which is at the end of Deerfield. If we were to build that handicapped accessible park in that space there where the wood chips are, not only would it attract even more people because all the play equipment is brightly colored and it's fun stuff for kids to play on, but it would also give people who are shopping and have their kids the ability to take them over and take a break and then maybe go back and do some more shopping, which the merchants really like, right? So I think it would help to improve the whole concept of the area and even drag some traffic down West River. So Spen's open to the TDRPD looking at that site if it's available. I can bring some slides from him and bring him in and talk about what they have planned for the end of Deerfield and maybe moving that down there. but I think that would benefit the community wholly to have something like that in that space.
Thank you. Okay, comments from this group?
I don't have to put a question on it?
No. Now you can just
All your
state your
thoughts.
opinion.
That place is also used as snow storage in the winter, that area. West Rivers, or Riverside Drive has no snow storage, and so they've piled it there. And in fact, a lot of the winter use I saw there was kids not in the park, but playing on the snow pile in the wood chip pile. So, I was kind of visualizing it in my mind as a flex space, and I think I mentioned it to Jen a while back, the idea of having the availability of like food trucks there in the summer. They could rent a spot or whatever, or just a part of it that has the flexibility to be different things that visually the idea, it just does not seem to, it just doesn't fit in the.
So I wanna we don't have to design the park tonight. What we need to do is provide a recommendation of whether, I think specifically whether housing should go there or not, or whether other activities, you know, like housing, something, nothing, would be kind of the good baskets.
Those would be helpful baskets
Helpful.
for the council.
Yeah, housing, commercial, nothing. Does that
Okay,
work?
I'm just gonna have some observations. I wanna make some observations, okay? So essentially, the south side of the river for the stretch of East and West River Street essentially provides public access in what is a fairly, for us, a natural area within an urban setting. On the north side, I don't know of any other public lawfully accessible land other than the park to the river. That Del Bay Umaway Park is the only place public has access on the north side. Housing's really important to us, but right now our general plan has development capacity for nearly 6,000 dwelling units, and the projected population growth between 2018 and 2040 is only 1,800 households. And so those capacities are there. We do want housing on West River Street. That's a big part of the redevelopment effort. But we've been talking about the north side of West River Street in particular, other areas, and not Del Bay Umaway Park. So that's it for now.
I will take it that you're a no housing and you're something else.
Now, I have to decide
I know,
when
no,
I'm
you
on
don't
the
get, I
council.
understand, but in the context of our little straw poll, Lisa, do you have?
You know, I probably need to own it. You all know that,
You can own it, yeah.
Previously, when we've been discussing housing, for me, housing on the north side of the river or the south side of West River Street, it's tough for me to sign up for that. So I would prefer that it's not, someone was just starting to say it, that it's not private, however we might characterize that. So, commercial, for me, given the context of everything that we talk about, I do think some commercial or food and beverage could work. But, again, one person, I would have kind of a lot of terms and conditions for it, you know, not too big, not too much, not too this, not too that, you know. And I also still love the space of the, if that is the correct phrase, the passive activation, leaving it as more open space. I love that idea too. So I think, so housing for me would be no, something else, maybe, nothing, yeah.
I'll just piggyback on that.
Thanks.
I don't wanna see housing there. I don't have to repeat, I'll just go ditto what other people have said. I think it's really important that we think about drawing people to our river. I think that's really important, the heart of this community, and what we have been doing for over 2 years. So I'd like to see it be an extension of the park or something with open space. But I wouldn't wanna see commercial or housing.
Staff?
Yep. I agree with Lisa and Pam. To me, now that it's built, we can really see what we have. And it's such a special spot to sit and reflect, listen to the water, the river, the birds, and a place for us to bring our families, our children. It's simple, it's quiet, it's peaceful. Housing isn't appropriate. And I think that expanding that use of a park would be a nice touch. Less is more for this site, and I think that's important to keep in mind. It brings to a park everything that's important. It doesn't need activation, stimulation, or anything like that from outside sources. You're there as the people that are there, the families that are there, activated every day.
Less is more.
Less is more.
Travis? You have a unique perspective here because you've seen it a lot.
Well, I struggle with a couple of things, because I've heard a lot of people talk about food trucks, and I see a lot of pop-up things all over town. The town doesn't address, Nevada County doesn't address, while Kristen's running a restaurant, adhering to strict health and safety codes and all this stuff, and they just pop up everywhere. And then if you look where those places are at, there is just shit everywhere. And do we want that on the river? I mean, if we're cleaning up the river, is that what we want, is like food trucks there? Because that's what I heard, is a lot of people are talking food trucks. Then those guys, what are they bringing to our community? They're coming in, they're taking money, and they're boogieing. Whereas everybody else that has a brick and mortar in town are left holding the bag, coming to these meetings, paying our taxes and doing all the stuff, and beating our heads against the wall. So I'm not open to food trucks at that park at all. Nor am I open to any mobile food vending in our town at all. And I think, I don't know why, I've called the 5th District Supervisor, left messages, why they're allowing those food vendors in our town. And if we open it up to food vending or commercial mobile stuff, and then somebody comes right across from me and opens up a mobile tire shop, that's gonna send me over the edge.
But what would you like there?
Mobile tire.
What do you see?
Well, first I
what
wanna
do you
know
want?
why isn't it going back out for sale?
It will. This
Not,
is
not if it stays the park.
Oh, not if it stays.
What?
Not
If it becomes a park, it won't go back out because there's nothing to.
So what is the process when somebody agrees to something and then they don't follow through? Is there a process that we're supposed to follow in trying to sell that property?
If we were to sell the property, we've already done the surplus process.
Okay.
If it were to expand into the park, the town would just do that. There wouldn't be a sale of the property. So
Okay.
there's no.
The other part to the question, what's going on the west side of the park? Do we have a commitment yet? Cause he was number 1 or 2 or 3 of the Catalyst project, and zero's happening there.
I don't know that I would say 0. So we didn't do that update because there weren't any questions for the committee on that, but there's a, application in, we're in the middle of CEQA, we're waiting for some additional information from the applicant, starting the communications piece of the Catalyst site, But so far, that's moving forward and the timelines are being met. The purchase and sale agreement has milestone timelines and so far.
I think an extension of the park is probably what I would say.
I got nothing.
And a cheer from the audience.
Wendy, do you want to come?
I would like to hear everybody, because I think, yeah.
Jeff? we
Well,
want to
and
hear-
can I just add, Travis, to your question of why would it not go out to an RFP? I think it was, council was discussing what should the next step be, and we said, well, we've got some ideas, why don't we bring it back to R2SC, who's been involved in this process? So I think that was kind of why I know a lot of us wanted to hear from this committee first.
Yeah. Yeah?
Propane tanks, landfill. No, I agree with what everyone said. There are very few places along the river corridor where you can see the river, you can feel it. It's all tied up in private land. I think keeping it open, flex space, I don't like the idea of turning it into commercial or housing or anything like that. I think agree with what everyone has said here tonight, to include a lot of the people that live over there.
Well, I had a vision for that piece of property that I spent money on developing. Lots of time and energy on it, and I just want to. I could go with nothing, although I do think that parks that have nothing can become unfunctional, and people don't. You don't have the right number of people showing up and activity going on. Sometimes it becomes seedy. So, like, that's the last thing I want to see happen there. I was in the camp that a smaller building with a large outdoor deck that got great sun in the winter time, that allowed people to come sit and look out on the river, did provide great community benefit and kept the park alive in the months when it wouldn't be. So that was our vision for it, and the thought behind why, and it was a small business incubator is what the actual food halls, a food hall concept. So it would take the little guys or the food truck guys off the streets and give them a small place that they could afford the rent to be able to, and shared eating, shared spaces. So that was the vision we had and why we had that vision. Do I still think it's a great idea? Yeah, because I still like it. But if we can continue to activate the park through other means, I think it's important though, that it just doesn't become the place where people use the bathrooms, and that's not what it's supposed to be.
And how are you on housing?
I am a no on housing. I think it privatized, I think I circled it when you were doing the thing, the connection to the river is completely lost then.
If it's housing.
If it's housing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so one of our main things is that it connects the site to the river.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Legally?
No, but we're not legal.
Well, isn't the old Chester building and the bars, that's activation, it's a food and beverage.
So theirs is a nighttime establishment.
Okay, so it's not a daytime, okay.
It's what has been proposed is a steakhouse that I'm aware of.
I
It
don't
may have
think
changed.
I think it's open for lunch.
But then it
I
would
think it's
probably be
open.
open
Yeah, I
for
think
the
it's
day,
open
and that would
for
be enough
lunch.
activation to solve that problem.
Yeah.
It wasn't originally, I don't.
It's a daytime,
Yeah.
not breakfast.
It's daytime,
Better
and
not.
there's
Lunch,
conference
dinner.
room
Yeah.
facilities.
Noise all the time,
they
noise
permit.
all the time.
They may expand that time frame too if the
Neon
park
lights.
becomes a
Is
customer.
that enough?
Festoon lighting.
That is enough. I heard consensus over nothing.
Yep, you did.
And it's not even
You
8:30.
did.
I know, you guys, that was gonna be the hard one, we thought. We do have a little time if there's committee updates, if anybody has anything they would like to add to tonight's conversation, committee updates.
Thank you to everybody.
No, thank
I
you.
I love being back together. Can't we do this more?
I think there's a capacity issue.
Thank you all
Thank
for
you all.
being able to come
Yeah,
to
thank
the
you,
same,
public,
at
for
the same
coming.
time and date.
Yes, we love having public.
Yeah.
I think that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying.